Well, drafting efficiency can be improved by lifting, say, details from one design and using them in a new design. And there are a number of ways to do that. The simplest is to, I'll regen my drawing. The simplest is to use a crossing window and select that part of the drawing that you want to use in another drawing. Right click and say copy to the clipboard. You can also use Control-C for the Windows copy command. If we now pick New File and use as our base the default drawing, or we could say a drawing with no template whatsoever. So if we click here, there will be no layers, and then we can right click and paste from the clipboard, and we're asked for an insertion point. I'm in the habit of typing 0, 0 and then zoom extents. So now there's our detail sitting in a brand new drawing. Well, at this point the detail is sitting in a drawing called No Name. So let's go File and Save As, and we'll navigate up, and we'll go to a folder I've called a spare, and we'll put that in Details, and we'll call this Granitic Path. It's probably worth at this stage changing my view to white, and then select everything in here, and then move, say, the bottom point here to coordinate 0, 0, and then unselect and zoom extents. We can then be certain that as we bring this new drawing, which we've called Granitic Path, into a different drawing, it'll be anchored at that point. You could say choose the Granitic Sand Pathway heading and make that the insertion point. Well, let's imagine that we're working on a different design and building a detail sheet. Now there are two approaches here. In this case, let me double click in here and I'll zoom out a little. Can you see that the details are arranged in model space? And I'll display on the layout, and we're looking in a floating viewport at that model space. So we could come back into the model, zoom in on that zone of details, and now we can use Insert and bring our new detail in and put it somewhere convenient. So let's try it. A couple of ways to do this. Pick blocks, and you're going to add a block, add from another file, and here's our granitic path, and the file is in use. I need to close it, so I'll close from there, go to granitic path and close it, and we'll try again. Blocks, add from another file, granitic path, and bring it into model space, and now it sits there. So we've happily brought that detail from one drawing into another. And as long as you're consistent in your use of text styles, you'd clearly have to change the C there, because each one of these details, I was going to say, has a different, there's a B and a C and a D, so we would right click and edit that block and change the text there to whatever is appropriate, whatever character is appropriate, then close the block editor. So now if we go to our details, can you see there's our newly added granitic pathway sitting there. Now that means there's a disadvantage of working that way. So let's just come back here and pick that block and come back into our details and see if we can use a different approach and perhaps pop it in down in this corner. You don't have to add details in model space. You can add them. Each one of the details you see here could in fact be a separate drawing from your block library. So we could bring it in directly into the layout space and have it sitting here. Almost certainly we're going to have to scale it a little to get it right, but that's not a particular problem. So let's approach the use of this block in a different way. I'm in layout space. I've removed the block from model space, and now I'll use a slightly different way of inserting a block. I go File and Insert a block, retainer block, it does jump straight into that blocks command, and that will say granitic path was there from our previous use of it and insert it in. Now I could say pick a scale, specify the scale on screen rather than type a number, and we can pop it in. We'd like to sit it down here. Notice how big it is, but as we drag up like so, we can just dynamically adjust the appearance of the detail to suit. And then if I take that floating viewport now and set its color to 255, essentially it disappears. So the detail that we lifted from one drawing is now being used in another drawing.